Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Served. I'm Alina, the UK and Ireland country lead at Campla. And today I am really excited to be joined by the head of ESG at Aramark UK and Global Offshore, Gina Camfield. Welcome.
Hi, Alina. It's so good to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I can't wait to dive into this conversation.
Yeah, neither can we. And rather than me trying to do your intro, Gina, could you tell us a bit about yourself? What drives your work today? How did you find yourself into the field of ESG and sustainability?
Sure, it's a big question and where to start. And without going back too far, and just to give the listeners a bit of an idea, funnily enough, my journey actually started with football. So I grew up playing football in and around academies for a large part of my early life. And at the time, women's football wasn't a common full-time career path, which it can be now, which is amazing. So I had to think a little bit outside the box and what's life going to look like outside of football and what I was going to do next. But during that time when I was playing football at a high level, it made me really aware of the impact that different things can have on the body and on performance. And I had a really big interest in nutrition and food. And that curiosity about nutrition really just snowballed and is still snowballing into the role that I'm doing today, heading up ESG for Aramark and for our UK and offshore business.
Exciting. And for context for everyone, when I and Gina absolutely first met for the first time, this was one of the first things that we came into talks about was our common interest in nutrition and the impact that it has on the body, just from the personal vested interest there. So it's really nice to have you here today. Just for the listeners, before we proceed, as we know, ESG is a very huge and can also sometimes be quite an overwhelming topic. So the aim of today is really to try to pull back the curtain a bit, try to get a bit more understanding of what's important here, what's actually working, and try to make it a bit more tangible, relatable, practical. And then we thought, who better to ask us to help doing that than yourself?
Yeah, hopefully we can help others find the way as well, because we're absolutely on that journey. Like you said, ESG is absolutely huge, and it can give you sleepless nights if you think about it too much as a lead in sustainability or ESG, thinking, oh my goodness, how am I gonna tackle all of these? But hopefully as we go throughout this conversation today, I can share some of our learnings, what's gone well, what's perhaps not gone well, and which will hopefully help others as well along the way.
Brilliant. So to start things off, we recently had a conversation with some leading consultants on another Served podcast just a few weeks ago, which was a really interesting one. But what they were saying is that for caterers, still many caterers today, ESG still feels like very much a tick box exercise. What do you think about that whole concept?
I think we're trying our best, and we really need to retire that myth and that sort of moving away from it being a tick box exercise to now we're actually seeing the tangible benefits that sustainability can bring to a business. I don't think we're there fully yet with all organisations. I do think that some do still see it as that tick box exercise because perhaps they've not got the resource in place there, they've not had the education that you need to understand actually the benefits that operating responsibly as a business, because that's what it really comes down to. We can call it ESG, sustainability, but really it's just about being responsible as a business. And I think those that are educated in that sense and understand the impact it can have are the ones that are going to start pulling away from those ones that are seeing it as a tick box exercise. And then they're going to be really on the back foot. If you're seeing it as a tick box exercise now, you're going to have a lot of catching up to do in 5, 10, 15, even 20 years' time.
That is really interesting. When you then also look at people that are doing it as a tick box exercise or doing it then just to quote unquote look good, what do you think separates the organizations, and now particularly in this conversation, the caterers that are actually using ESG as part of their DNA and really embedding it versus those that are doing it for the ticking and the looking good?
I mean, I guess it comes back to the point that you raised at the start, that ESG touches so many different areas of business that it's hard to even just talk to one area where we're going to see a big difference. Take, for example, the first one that comes to mind for me is around that regulation and legislation part. If you're trying to do sustainability as a tick box exercise, there's going to be a real chance that you might be missing out and risk sort of a real negative impact on your business through not meeting legislation and regulation guidelines. And that's going to come with hefty penalties. And it's also going to really negatively impact your brand reputation as well. We then move to our customer base. We're seeing that our customers and clients, they're asking for sustainability now. Yes, there are other drivers when customers and clients are making their decisions, such as cost, of course, taste, quality of produce, but sustainability is a driver in people making decisions. So if you're just acting on it as a tick box exercise and you're not actually implementing anything in your business, you're at risk of losing customers. You're at risk of losing clients that you've potentially had long-term relationships with. And you're also missing a gap in the market as well for those clients that are asking to partner with like-minded businesses, perhaps in that sustainability space.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. Could you tell us a little bit about the, again, very wide and intangible concept, but can you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing for ESG at Aramark today?
Sure. So to give people a bit of context, I guess, around Aramark as well, we're a leading catering and facilities management provider. We're a global business. Area covers the UK and global offshore. And just in our business, we serve over 250,000 meals every day across a multitude of sectors. So we're thinking of government services, education, from primary through to university, healthcare, sports and entertainment industry, so from stadiums to leisure parks, workplaces, and oil rigs. So it's pretty vast in terms of the amount of people we're serving, but also the impact that we can have. But our organisation and our operations and our business strategy is underpinned by our ESG work called Be Well, Do Well, which covers 8 key pillars around ESG. So we mentioned that sort of broad topic of ESG. This is how we've structured it into 8 key pillars, 4 of which fall under people, 4 of which fall under planet. So it's all about how can we have a positive impact on people and reduce the impact that we're having on the planet. So it encompasses everything from the safety of our people, the well-being of our people, to the well-being of the customers that we're serving, how we're partnering with smaller and more diverse suppliers, how we're being more sustainable in our approach with our suppliers as well, focusing on things like animal welfare, biodiversity, looking at our operation efficiency, and looking at things like embedding circularity and reducing our use of single-use plastics. So we've got a really robust ESG strategy, which is really throughout our business strategy as well, which I think is absolutely key. We can't have the two sitting separate, because in order to make key business decisions, we need to be considering sustainability at the same time as well. But what we're very passionate about is that whilst we've got this robust ESG strategy, it's all about how can we bring it to life for people to see and experience the difference that we're having, be that on our own employees. We're seeing now that employees want to work for businesses that are responsible businesses. So how can we take that to them to demonstrate that we are, and so that they can get involved? How can we demonstrate to our customers the impact that we're having as well, and the benefits that they can make by choosing more sustainable options or getting involved in the initiatives that we're creating? So there's a lot going on underneath all of that, and we've got some fantastic teams in the business who are driving each of those key pillars, because that's another really important thing, that it's not just one person, one team in a business. It's not just the sustainability team's responsibility to be driving ESG. At the end of the day, it's everyone's responsibility. So each of those pillars is headed up by a different department or area of the business. And what we've seen is that this has really helped to drive our interaction with our employees with the Be Well, Do Well programme, because it's all about getting the right people, talking to the right people. And the best example we've got in the business is we've recently restructured our food platform, which is our culinary team. So we've got Paula O'Neill is our head of culinary now for the business, and she's fantastic, come in and really changed our approach with how we are doing things from a culinary perspective. And she introduced this role into the business of a culinary lead for planet and well-being. And the individual that stepped into the role, Lee Martin, was already in the business, very highly respected, but also really passionate in this area as well. And what he's been doing with our culinary teams has been amazing, because chefs speak to chefs, right? If I go into a kitchen and start telling a chef to reduce the amount of meat in it with no culinary experience whatsoever, they're going to question that a little bit. But whereas if we put the right people in the right place and talking to each other, then that's when they can really sort of start to understand it as well, which can be hard, because there's a lot of jargon we use in the sustainability world. It's hard to keep up with, and it's all about how we can break that down, make it easy for everyone to understand, and everyone to feel a part of as well.
Yeah. Wow, that's so exciting. It seems like you also have so much on your plate and everything that you're doing in the space.
There's so much. Your head's bouncing around all of the time, trying to think of new ways, trying to stay on track with everything you're doing, because it's so fast evolving as well. Which is, to be honest, one of the things I love about working in this space is that we don't know the answers for a lot of things just yet.
Yeah.
So we have to be agile. We have to be constantly innovating and sort of evaluating what we're doing. But yeah, it's a great space.
Yeah. Still yet to be figured out.
Absolutely.
And you did talk about, and you mentioned showcasing the benefits of ESG and the work that you're doing in initiatives to clients. If we take a step back and we look at things from an internal perspective, which also then has an impact on clients in the longer term, but looking at the link between sustainability and profitability, because that's always a bigger question. It's not always an easy sell, especially when there's a perceived cost with everything that you're doing around it involved. What is it that you're doing, and what can others do to help measure their return on investment? How can they help measure and track the work that they're doing in a more like quantifiable way?
Yeah, I think you touch on a really great point there, because it is paramount for anyone looking to drive sustainability forward in business that we can evidence the impact that sustainability can have specifically on the bottom line. And I think we also, something that we've been doing is rethinking the words that we're using with that. So starting to talk about sustainability as being an investment rather than a cost. And I think just that shift alone will hopefully take away some of the potential fears or connotations that sustainability has on the bottom line. And because we know that sustainability can be a really key driver in our business. When we do it right, we can reduce waste, we can improve efficiencies, we can boost our brand trust, it can help us to win business. And like I say, we're seeing clients, customers now expecting sustainability, and it's becoming a key decision maker in some of those key situations. I'd say there are a couple of different ways. I'd say one of the main ways is tackling waste is something that any food service business can start to do regardless of the size of your operations. And if you want to see a quick, immediate impact on your bottom line, I think I read a statistic that around 9% of food that's purchased by food service doesn't even make it onto a plate, which is phenomenal. Now, thinking realistically, are we ever going to get that to zero? I'm not sure. I like to be hopeful, and I believe that we can, but it might take some time. Yeah, exactly. That's an area straight away where we could start to see impacts. So, a good example from our business, through our food waste program, we implemented smarter forecasting, new redesigns, sort of really trying to track as much of our food waste as possible through our internal recipe management system that was already in place. And through implementing this, we saw a reduction immediately from 12% to 3% in our waste, which was huge. And these savings aren't just a way to reduce waste, but of course to reduce your operating costs significantly, which at a time like the present is really key. You've also got efficiencies that can be made in kitchens as well that can affect the bottom line. So whilst the optimal solution when trying to sort of create a more sustainable kitchen, let's say, might be to invest in new equipment, when that capital isn't there, there's still things that we can be doing. And you can look at what you're already doing to see where savings can be made. So, for example, we launched an initiative called Fire Up, where we asked our audits to look at the time they were turning their equipment on and the time that it was actually being used. Because as an operator, it's not uncommon that you'd walk into your kitchen, you'd start to turn everything on and fire it up while you're doing your prep. But we were asking them to look at, well, if you're turning your dishwasher on first thing in the morning, but not using it until 12 o'clock in midday, for example, and let's look at the impact that would have. And we were seeing average sort of time savings of equipment being on, like a dishwasher, I think was being turned on for around an hour and a half later each day. The fryer was being turned on an hour later each day. The hot counter was being turned on for an hour later each day when they actually sat down and looked at our operations. So, and that might not sound like a lot, an hour a day for a bit of equipment, but if we add that up every day over the duration of a year and across the hundreds of sites that we're servicing, the impact that could have on savings is absolutely huge.
Especially for a company your size, this really reminds me of the phenomenon of doing 1% better every day. And 1% sounds incredibly small, but when you actually accumulate it and over time, you're going to see a huge impact, and particularly then at the scale that you're operating.
Exactly. And on our industry as well, operating on such fine margins, 1% is a lot. And it is really interesting for me because it relates back to sort of my days in sport and nutrition and the fine margins you operate on in sport to try and get that 1% gain. It's actually very similar to the food service and hospitality industry.
So I like that connection.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. So if you actually then think about ESG and business performance, now I guess this can also be a bit of a tricky one, but what do you do when doing the right thing is a lot more expensive or slower or harder to justify?
Yeah, I think they're not easy conversations to have. And that's where if you can get as much access to data as possible, that's going to really help. And if you can also build on as much of those profitability pieces as we can, so whether it be reducing waste, be it reformulating recipes to include more plant-based options, for example, and trying to drive down the cost price of our recipes in the first place. But if you can demonstrate where sustainability is making savings in a business, that's then going to be able to help you to put the case forward if investment is needed for something, which in some instances it can. But I think what links into that and is really key, and I'm in an exceptionally fortunate position at Aramark in this, but you need to have board buy-in when it comes to sustainability. That education part is really key throughout the whole business. From the board all the way down. But like I say, Aramark, we're really fortunate in that our board are very much on board with this. They understand and they've seen the impact that we can deliver. We've got internal targets and KPIs set around sustainability. And I feel really proud that the leaders within our business can speak to sustainability fantastically. And that certainly makes my job a lot easier, but I know that's not the case for other businesses out there. But there are some amazing training courses that can be delivered specifically to the board from organizations out there. For example, Zero Carbon Forum offer a fantastic program where they'll come into your business, speak to the board, educate them and show them the impact that operating sustainability and making these savings can have. And so I definitely recommend anyone who's not in that fortunate position to explore that route, because that will really help you in order to have those conversations when looking to seek investment, but also just looking to drive any initiative into your business.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I can imagine also having the board buy-in is one thing, but getting there is the longer journey. Um, And if you think about things from a smaller caterer's perspective, maybe there's somebody who's just now starting to tap into ESG, or they're just finally getting started and they want to measure things, but they don't necessarily have bigger tools or bigger costs or budgets to spend for it. What would you advise that they start doing in order to make sure that what they're doing, they can actually track, and that they can then use the results to also make some informed decisions on how to continue to improve?
Yeah, it's a good question there. I'd say to start with what you can influence, because ESG is so broad. Really think about what are the key impacts to your business. For us, and this is probably the case for most contract caterers out there in particular, around 76% of our emissions come from scope 3 purchase goods and services, which is the food that we're purchasing and selling essentially. So we know that's where we can make the biggest difference. And that's probably the case for most other food services out there. So start with the things you can influence, like your menus, like your waste, your suppliers, your people who you can train, and really build from there. And I'd say that don't aim for perfection, because to be honest, I don't think anyone knows what perfection looks like in this world just yet. And if you aim for perfection, you're just going to sit there for so long trying to figure out what it looks like, and years will pass and no action will be taken. And to be honest, I've seen a lot of companies that produce really pretty ESG strategies and they look fantastic, but actually what we really want to see is what difference is being made. And that can come from just starting really small, measuring the progress that you're making. So really try and capture any data points that you can along the way, even if at the time you're thinking, I'm not sure how to use this, trust me, in a year's time you'll be looking back thinking, I wish I had the data for that. So start small, measure as much as you can along the way, and then also just be really transparent to your business, transparent when communicating these things externally as well, and then you will make a big difference. We don't have to do huge things to make that 1% difference that you spoke about earlier in this space. And we don't need a dedicated team, dedicated resource in the business to be able to do this either.
That's a good advice. If we shift gears a little bit, and I'm really curious about the S in ESG and the whole topic of social value, again, an incredibly broad term. What does social value mean in this context?
Yeah, so I think this is a really exciting space. I think recently we've seen a lot of focus perhaps on the E part, on the environmental. The G, governance, is that sort of piece that just underpins and is there all of the time and sort of just churns away in the background. But the S piece is really coming to life now, that social piece. It's amazing to see. It might not mean much to some people still when we say social value, but the way we define social value to our teams is the value that we add to people's lives beyond the amazing food that we're serving. So it's what we add to the lives of our employees, our customers, our clients, and also the local communities that we're serving, because we're in such a privileged position with our business, with the size and the scale, and also the amazing people that we've got within it, that we've got so much that we can give back, like I say, beyond our food. And that can come in so many different forms when we look at social value. So it can be anything from the job opportunities that we're creating for people who are underrepresented in the workplace. It can be delivering life skills workshops for those in colleges and schools. It can be partnering with local smaller suppliers, supporting food poverty initiatives like food redistribution, volunteering, charity donations. So much falls into social value. And to be honest, it's probably a lot of stuff that businesses are already doing, but it's now just sort of stepping back and taking a more structured approach to looking at it, and also a more strategic approach as well to make sure we're putting resource into the right place, capturing it, and how we tell those stories. So that's the next step that we've been taking in the social value space, looking at how we can capture and measure and see the impact that we're having. We use something called the social value portal, which translates all of the actions that we're doing into financial proxies. And this allows us to see, and our clients to see, the real world impact of what we're doing. So for example, we can look at the impact that mentoring a young person or volunteering in a community kitchen might have on our clients and on our business in terms of a social return. And we're able to report on that as well. So yeah, it's really, really interesting when you get into the nitty gritty of it. We've got a social value executive, Lauren, who's doing an amazing job delivering in this area, creating our strategy in this space, capturing the work that we're doing, and then just really bringing it all together for us to celebrate.
Very nice. With the social value platform, is that an in-house product that has been built by your team, or is it one that's been outsourced?
No, it's an external one. A lot of science and research has gone into sort of the framework that they use, the TOMS framework, and that's what we measure against. But they have a platform where we can log all of the activities that we're doing across our whole business. And then at the end of the year, they will audit the activity and give us a nice green tick to verify all of that information. And then we can communicate that out and like I say, have a look at the monetary value we've created in terms of social value and give them back to the community.
So in an effort to keep things tangible, how do you have an example of an initiative, for instance, that goes into the social value portal and how it then translates that into the monetary or the financial aspect?
Yeah, so oh my gosh, there's so much. It's hard to think of one example because, like I say, even local employment, it will take a proxy for each region of the area. And if you employ someone locally, and that criteria might be 10, 15, 20 miles, depending which region of the country you're sitting in, it will then give you a monetary value for what social value you've added to that community by employing someone locally. It will do the same on different criteria of who you've employed as well. Great example for us is we have Aramark ABC Day, which is our Building Communities Day. It's a day that Aramark gives to all employees to go and give back to the community. So the other week I was working with Safe and Sound in Derby, painting one of their youth spaces and creating this nice little sensory area for them. It was fantastic. But across the UK, all of these volunteering hours add up and we can put them into the portal and it will give us an idea of how much monetary value we've created by donating those hours. You can also capture things like charity donations in there as well, which is sort of a pound-to-pound return.
It seems like there's a lot of work that also goes into making sure that ESG is also paramount to the company. It's also embedded into the culture, into the day-to-day operations. Everyone's on board with what the vision is for this particular aspect. Now, what do you think about getting people, and not necessarily internally, but clients and end clients or consumers, getting them bought into ESG? Is it storytelling? Is it incentive? Is it leadership from the top, role modeling? Do you have any examples that you've worked with previously?
To be honest, I think it's a mix of all of those, and it's a big job to do. It's one that we're very much on the journey of. Some are more bought in than others, particularly when it comes to our customers. And I think each needs quite a targeted approach. So in terms of in terms of educating our own employees, for example, we launched the Planet Ambassador Programme. And the Planet Ambassador Programme aims to educate our employees in Be Well, Do Well, so our 8 core pillars of ESG. But it also gives them real life examples of how they can take it home and translate it into their home life as well. We'll take them out to one of our land-based colleges that we do the catering at so that they can see agricultural processes in action, and we'll get lecturers from the university or college to come in and talk to them about sustainability, regenerative farming, biodiversity, these sort of things, so that they can live and feel it. And that's just an example of an educational program that we've put in place. I mean, when our community team first launched that, we were expecting maybe to get 20, 30 people that might want to come along. We had over 200 applications, which was amazing. But that's just an example of how we're educating our own team to take them on that journey, and that is open to anyone in our business. So not just culinary, it can be front of house, back of house, HR, business development. Anyone can come on that journey with us. I think there's a big piece around the customer education as well. We've used tools such as carbon labeling, which we do through Foodprint provided by Nutritics, in order to score all of our recipes on a rating of A to E, a bit like your white household good efficiencies, to educate customers on the environmental impact of the dishes that we're serving. And this is amazing because we can theoretically empower people to make more sustainable choices. But when we actually look at the impact that carbon labeling is having on potentially driving behaviour change in customers, is a little bit uncertain as to whether it's actually having an impact. I think it's more of an awareness at the moment, but there are other things that are driving customers to make sustainable decisions. There are other things that are driving consumer behaviour choices. Cost, quality and taste are always paramount in our surveys that we're doing, and then sustainability is that sort of the nice to have. So I wouldn't say that carbon labelling at the moment is making everyone choose that lower carbon option. But that's really important information still. That doesn't mean we should stop doing it. What it means is that we can use that information back of house when we're re-engineering our recipes and our menus to put more lower carbon options on the menu. But actually it's about not just making the sustainable option available, it's actually making it desirable so that they want to choose that option because it ticks all of their other preferences as well. So it's cost effective, it tastes great, the quality is great. Oh, and you know what? It's actually better for the environment as well. And that's the point that we really need to try and get to, so that it's embedded, part of our DNA, and people can trust that the food that we're serving, and this isn't just at Aramark, this is across the industry, they know it's good for them, they know it's good for the planet. And we're all also, I guess we're almost taking away that I have to make a sustainable choice, because we just have to make the choice that they're making the sustainable choice anyway.
I like that. I really like that. We talked a bit earlier about food waste, for instance, being a big thing that can have a big impact very quickly. And it's also something that is easy to measure, and you can very quickly see some results from that. In scenarios, and this is not just specific for contract catering, this is beyond that, like hospitality wide, but you know, you have hotels where you have hotel breakfast, you have free issue breakfast, maybe at some catering sites where people help themselves, often a bit too much, and then it goes, or a lot of it goes then into the bin, unfortunately. So as part of that, when people often help themselves to a bit too much, is there anything that we can do to help drive end consumer behavior change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of ways we can get smart about it. So looking at the size of plates, so the plates can't be overfilled, and encouraging people to have what's on their plate and then go back for more if they need it is quite useful in the buffet scenarios, rather than having a big plate that people feel like they need to load up, and then you're likely to see more left at the end of the day. And from a health perspective, that's also going to have benefits as well if we're trying to moderate people's consumption there. So things like reducing the size of the plate, any nudges that we can put around the spaces as well to educate people on food waste. And it might not be directly related to the choice that they're going to make there, but just by calling out key facts that we know. So around a third of the food that's produced globally goes to waste. That's incredible. And that alone just gets you thinking about, I need to be more conscious with how I'm managing food waste. So I think little educational nudges that we can put along the way are really important. And it's about customers still want to have that choice. We don't want to be making that choice for them all of the time, particularly in those sort of venues where perhaps if you're going to a hotel, you're going on a holiday to a leisure park where it's a nice experience, you don't want to feel like your experience is being controlled by someone else because it's a bit of a treat. But actually, can we just nudge them in making a better choice? And that's also going to then have a consequence, not just on how they're behaving in your own operations, but also translating into the decisions they're making outside of that as well and into their home life.
Yeah, very nice. And we had a brief chat probably a couple of months ago now around the work that you're doing in prisons and at government sites and helping advise people around different types of food and also how it has different benefits and so on. Can you talk to us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the piece of the work that we're doing there is really interesting. We spoke earlier about how food waste can help improve our margins, which is fantastic from a business perspective, but we're actually looking at how we can reduce our food waste to also and educate customers to also give back to them as well for making better choices. And this is brilliant for when you're working in settings where you have, for example, or you're limited to a cost per head per day. So we spoke about prisons earlier, but it can also really support things like the education space where you're operating on quite a fine cost per head per day that you have to feed to. What we saw was that food waste in our prison areas was quite high and it was costing us on circa, or we worked out that we could save potentially around £4,000 a month by significantly reducing food waste. And that comes down to educating people not to waste so much food, basically. So we thought, well, if we can encourage people to not waste so much food and we can make this saving, how can we then give that back to them? And that acts as a bit of an incentive then to not waste their food. And if we do that over the course of, say, a month, then we can say, well, per head, you can have an extra £2 allocation on your food allowance. It allows us to give them an enhanced meal, and that can be replicated, like I say, in any setting where we're really tight on the margin with the cost per head. If we can incentivize them that if you reduce your food waste, we'll have more money to put back into your feeding and you can have a nicer meal at the end of it. I think that is a really nice incentive. And like I say, it's not all about how we can profit off of reducing our food base, but there's a big scope there for how we can give back with it as well.
And that really also ties in with the whole experience of also choosing to maybe outsource sometimes, or you choose more ethical supply chains versus doing something locally. And that is also a really fine balance. How do you juggle that?
Yeah, it is. And especially when there's procurement guidelines now sort of encouraging companies to partner with more SMEs, which for us was fantastic because we've got targets to increase our spend with SMEs anyway. So we really welcome changes like that because it's really important that we're giving those SMEs a platform to be able to build and that we are using local suppliers because although we're a tiny island, we've got some amazing produce in this country and we really want to be showcasing that. But like you say, it can bring about its challenges. We need to make sure, particularly when operating on a business of our size, that those suppliers have the relevant documentations and the safety management procedures in place so that we can bring them into our business and ensure that we're still able to display allergens, etc. And we can place 100% trust in that company when we're bringing them on board. And that can be a challenge. But again, there's some great. We use SEDEX when onboarding our suppliers, and that's a really good sort of governance tool to make sure we're bringing in the right suppliers. But I think it's a good journey we're on. It also allows us more access to be able to support them SMEs as well, because let's be honest, we're asking SMEs to report on so much now, because as a business, we need to report on our carbon emissions. Those SMEs fall into our scope 3 emissions, and we're then asking them for data that it might just be a farmer running his own business How can we expect them to do that? But again, that's a great opportunity for businesses the size of Aramark with our procurement teams to really support SMEs on their journey in this sustainability space as well, where they might not have experts, but we can use our experts to upskill, educate them and support them in their business development.
And education is one thing, and I can also imagine that like any, I guess, government policies that are coming into place or regulations is something that can really help support and drive the efforts and the bigger focus that we might want to have on ESG generally in the sector. It's now, only a few years ago since they introduced the 10% mark for social value in weighting for government contracts.
Yeah, really
How do you
recently.
see that? Yeah, sorry. You go.
Yeah, really recently that came in, putting so much emphasis on social value, the use of SMEs. And it's a significant change, but like I say, one that we really welcome because we as a business know the positive impact that social value can have. And we're already on a really good journey with that. So yeah, for us, we welcomed that change, but it's not so easy. And I think going back to the regulation, the legislation piece, I think, to be honest, it's a shame that we require regulation and legislation sometimes, because often it's just encouraging us to do the thing that is the right thing to do. But they can be really useful in helping to drive change and drive compliance to those sort of things. And there's some fantastic bodies out there that can help sustainability leaders and businesses stay on top of all of these change and regulations as well, the likes of the UK Hospitality, BSA, the Hospitality Sector Council, are really great for keeping you informed and also providing resources to make sure that your business is compliant with all of those sort of things. So anyone listening to this who's not already engaging in those sort of groups, then I definitely recommend you to do so.
Brilliant. Gina, it sounds like you're sitting on so much knowledge in this space, but also you have so much learnings and so much experience to come with. And the work that you're doing at Aramark is amazing. I love the fact that you have a board level approval and buy-in and everyone's on board with the changes that you want to make, and to make this very visible and really try to narrow it down so it becomes tangible, relatable, and something that you can actually work with. Now, you are actually leading ESG at a massive organization, and you have a big scope, big remit, and big responsibility with that. Now, if you look at things just from a more personal perspective, what's your personal philosophy on leadership in this space, and what do you hope your legacy will be?
Goodness me, it's a big question. And I think when you put it like that, I almost don't feel that pressure and the fact that I'm in a big organization because of the team that I've got around me. Because I feel that it's not just my responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. And that's just the sort of ethos that our team feel as well. And I think having the right people around you is the key part to any success. And again, I guess that speaks back to sort of my days playing football, in that it's not one person that's going to drive change and that's going to make us successful, be it as a business, be it specifically in the ESG space. We all have to come together on this. And so I think for me, it's how we can look back on that. And also just from a personal perspective, I really hope that we can sort of raise the profile of the hospitality industry in general, because it's an amazing industry to be working in. There are so many opportunities in it beyond that we might initially think of. You might initially think of culinary or serving, those sorts of things. But actually all of the hidden roles in the central functions like marketing, ESG, nutrition, finance, HR, there's so much to offer in the hospitality industry. So I really hope that I can play a part in raising the profile of that, supporting other people on their journeys as well. And then I'll retire very happy.
Yeah, and I think this is also a very good reminder that every little helps. So for also those that are listening today, do your bit to help educate somebody about something that is related to the planet or people at your workplace, or just try to have a bigger impact and be kind to the people around you and make the world a bit of a better place.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, coming towards the end, we do need to round up. Before we do so, is there any final remarks that you would want to share with our listeners today?
No, I think you summarised it perfectly. A big here to what you just said there. Let's continue on this journey together, continue to share. And just a huge thank you for having me on this podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Gina. I really enjoyed this chat and really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Served. Bye.